Hello, my name is Yasmin. Welcome to African Diaspora Discussions. Welcome to episode 3. Today we're going to be discussing, does the Black vote matter? I'm joined with a lovely panel. If you'd like to introduce yourself, starting with Kel.
Hi, my name is Kel Shabazz. I'm located in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a 9th grade English teacher and also an activist.
Thank you very much. And Shawn?
My name is Shawn Carter. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I am a legislative analyst, a political researcher, and a little bit of everything else. And thank you for having me here this afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. And Two Black, please.
Yes, I go by the name Two Black. I am a poet and a podcast host and educator. I'm based in Indianapolis, Indiana. The podcast name is the Black Myths Podcast. We essentially just debunk the bullshit said about Black people. So again, thanks for having me here. I look forward to this discussion.
Thank you very much. And Charmagne, please.
My name is Charmagne. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a financial systems analyst. I am a self-proclaimed political strategist, and I just want to thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. Lotus?
My name is Lotus, and I am a surgical technician and activist, and is somewhat of an educator also.
Nice. Thank you very much. And lastly, Dwayne?
Hey, well, I'm Dwayne. I'm from Cleveland. I'm a marketing guy, former troublemaker in Cleveland State University, and former pastor, and just like activist now. I've been through a lot to get me here now.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for introducing yourself. As you all know, there's a presidential election going on between Republicans, Democrats, Biden versus Trump. There's been a lot of conversation within the Black community of whether or not we should vote. It seems like a lot of politicians target the Black community, and we have this phrase called the Black vote, trying to emphasize the need for Black people to come out and vote. But the question is, does the Black vote matter? And meaning behind this is that, you know, a lot of people have said that time and time again, Black people come out and vote, and then after the election is over, all the promises and the initiatives and the ideas is silenced. You don't hear from them anymore. So I would just like to start off the question by asking anyone, just throw it out there, what is the history of the Black voting pattern in the United States? And does anyone have any background story in regards to the politics of it all?
Well, this would be quite interesting.
What is the question is, what is the history of the Black vote?
Yeah, so what's the patterns have we seen? So obviously I'm based in the United Kingdom, but I am aware that, you know, back in the day, the Republicans were actually somewhat had democratic ideologies, and then it switched over. And now we have this saying that, you know, a lot of Black people just by default votes for the Democrats. And does anyone know the history behind that, when it started happening, like we started voting for the Democrats?
I can, unless somebody else wants to go, I'll take that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, if anybody has any more information, feel free to fill it in. I don't think I exhaustively know that history either, but I would just to get like a quick run through. I mean, obviously, slaves couldn't vote, or enslaved Black people couldn't vote. So there were, you know, there were a few free Black folks, free is relative here, but there's a few free Black folks in the North who could vote, but largely they would have been voting Republicans because they were the ones who, at the time, were more likely to be abolitionists. Once you get out of slavery, and, you know, they called it the party of Lincoln. Lincoln gets assassinated. Andrew Johnson was actually a supreme racist. That was a president that follows him. And he was essentially impeached. And then that's when Ulysses Grant comes in. They passed 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. The 15th Amendment is what actually guarantees the right to vote. 14th Amendment was citizenship. 13th Amendment abolished slavery technically, except for indentured servitude, hence prison. So, and then we go through the Reconstruction era, which is about from 1867 to 1876. It's called, after around 76, 77, it's called the Great Compromise.
Yeah.
That's when they essentially pulled, the Republicans and Democrats struck a deal to pull troops out of the South.
Yeah.
And, you know, Black people were pretty much disenfranchised within the next 5 to 10 years. At the time, though, during Reconstruction, we had more representation probably up until the 70s. It had more Senate representation then in the South than we even have today. And I think an important thing to remind people is there weren't as many white immigrants in the country, so Black people actually made up a larger portion of the population. And I think that gets forgotten. So, you know, Italians and Irishmen, and they weren't in America at the level they are today. And you know, in the 1800s. So go through Jim Crow and in the South, and you know, just overall fascism in the South and apartheid, as well as really the whole country. As Malcolm X said, anything south of Canada is the South, right? So it was all bad. And then we don't collectively have the right to vote in the South. And then in the North, everything is so gerrymandered that the Black vote doesn't really matter much in the North anyway, as far as the way it was districted. To not go through every different phase, but to just kind of jump to it. In 1965 was when the Civil Rights Bill for voting was passed. That came through a lot of on the ground struggle to even get that to happen. And since then, there's been fights as far as districting and voting. And then in 2010, they shut down, I think it was 2010, the Supreme Court didn't completely destroy the voting rights bill, but they weakened it to where southern states used to have to go through a federal process to put their voting laws in place. After that, they didn't have to do that. And that's where you got a lot of these voter suppression laws. As far as the pattern of Black people voting, that was largely Republican up until Roosevelt. That's a popular story. There are other stories to that, like where I'm actually initially from in Muncie, Indiana. Black people switched to the Republican Party, or excuse me, we switched to the Democratic Party because so many of the Republicans had been infiltrated by the Klan. And in Indiana, the Klan used to run essentially the entire party.
Okay.
You know, time. So, but the popular story is that when Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was elected in the 30s around, you know, the Great Depression and leading into the World War II, that's when Black people switched over when he ran the New Deal. Even though the New Deal was fairly racist, it still gave a few opportunities. Black people have been voting Democrat more and more since then. Since 1964 was the last year that Democrats won the majority of the white vote. And ever since then, the majority of the white voters went to the Republicans. They implemented what's called the Southern strategy, where they tried to get what was called the Dixiecrat, the Southern white Democrats. They defected from the Democratic Party into the Republican Party. And we pretty much have the alignment that we have today. That's, I think, the best way to put it.
Thank you so much for such an in-depth history, because obviously a lot of confusion. Oh, it's in-depth, yeah. There's a lot of confusion over here, for example, where the switch happened. When you take, like, you know, the Republicans were kind of the forefathers of trying to like abolish slavery. Everyone's like, but associate Republicans to, you know, far right extremists, kind of what we have today. That's, does anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, can I add a little something to that? Like, I wanted to focus like more on like the movement, like the morale and everything of our movement during all these election times. It basically went from hope to nope. Like, that was like the biggest hope of our people, because us as a movement, we created this movement to like, okay, maybe voting will work. Okay, like this is their system, so we gonna get into their system and work this voting system. And to me, we succeeded. Like we actually conquered the voting system when we took over it. We actually took over the voting system, but when they knew we were taking it over, they changed it. They changed the game on us. Like, so, and our people recognized that. Our people as a whole recognized that, and we split off into two sections. We split off into one section that became the Black Power movement, the Black Panthers and all this, that were like, hey, the vote didn't work. Now we about to take up arms and we about to gather and create with each other and uplift each other. And the group that wasn't on fighting massa like, or the government. It was another group that like, we're not about to fight the government, so we have to submit to what the government gives to us. And those folks, it was the path of least resistance. So that's where the majority went. And that's why now you have like the minority are the people that's like, hey, Black power, like let's build with each other. They're a very small minority, and the masses are, hey, vote for Biden, because I hate to put it in so many terms, but a lot of our people ain't want that smoke. They didn't want the smoke. And that's our issue right now. Don't nobody want no smoke, but it's gonna take some smoke for us to get out of this.
Well,
Right?
I would have to jump in here because I beg to differ on that fact. Let's first take it back to the 1960s, where you had the major switch. And I agree with everything the first brother said as far as how the history of the Black vote went. I have no, I heard no lies told in that story. I mean, he has it dead on from everything that I've researched over the years. One thing to note that's key was in the 60s, where you did garner a lot of African American support, or a lot of Black voter support. And prior to that, you also had a lot of Black voters that still, although they voted Democrat, they did not yet identify as Democrats. So once you got to the 60s, the big thing that occurred was the alliance formed between the Kennedys and Martin Luther King. And it started before the Kennedys were elected, or before President Kennedy was elected. He was able to get Martin Luther King out of jail one night. And the Democratic Party sort of, I would go ahead fairly enough, they kind of used that to their advantage in the Black community to get the Kennedy ticket elected. And I believe in return, the Kennedys kind of pushed forward the notion of, we're going to get the Civil Rights Bill passed. During the Kennedy administration, before he was assassinated, there were many events that occurred. The first integration of college, colleges where the two individuals were trying to get in, and the governor, who was a Democrat, blocked the door and said, no, I'm not allowing this school to be desegregated. The Attorney General at the time, Robert Kennedy, got on the phone, and his brother, they called in the National Guard. And the National Guard said, if you do not move, Governor Wallace, we will move you. So that's when you got a lot more support that since then has never wavered from the Democratic Party. And you bring it forward now, or you bring it up into the 70s with the Black Panther Party movement. A lot of them, and I was talking to Brother Kel a couple of weeks ago about this. A lot of those brothers, after the systemic dismantlement of the Black Panther Party, a lot of them enter politics themselves. Huey Newton ran for city council. Bobby Seale ran for mayor. You had Eldridge Cleaver, he attempted to run for president. So it's not about them saying, oh no, screw the government doesn't work for us. It was about them saying, instead of backing away and turning our back on the system, let's get up inside the system and make the system sink and give it indigestion and make it work for us. You have a lot of former Black Panthers and a lot of former leaders of the Black community that are still serving in government roles today. You have Bobby Rush, who is still a congressman, and other individuals who are part of both sides of that era that are still serving in government roles today. So I wouldn't necessarily say that, they're not on the government, side.
Can I say something real quick? I know other people want to talk. Both of y'all bring up good points. I think with the Panthers, it's important to note, it kind of goes to both of your points. There was a split among the Panthers that I don't think always gets talked about. So there was the, basically the above ground Panthers. Then there was what was called the Black Liberation Army. and they weren't running for Congress or anything. They were
Right.
more, what Dwayne was saying. They were more like ready to fight the cops. And you know, if you look at Daruba Bin Wahad, Assad Shakur was a part of this group, and they had beef with the Panthers because they thought they were too reformist based. But it is also true that the Panthers, especially into the mid 70s, did start to run for office. Bobby Seale also ran, Elaine Brown also ran for office. And they were more focused on the breakfast programs and the mutual aid stuff. And as Huey said, pending revolution. But neither side believed in the legitimacy of the government. I think it was more so they saw, one side saw these things as a means to an end. The other side just felt like we should completely divest from it. And I think we have that debate today as well, right? So
Yeah, it's still going.
yeah.
And I think that you also see the same thing with W.E.B. Du Bois. Like before, a lot of people, they consider him like to be the father of Pan-Africanism.
Right.
You know, at this point, you know, and before that, you know, W.E.B. Du Bois, when he was going up against Booker T. Washington, he was more so about, you know, infiltrate the system, you know, get you a place within politics, and then you'll be able to, you know, get the things that you want as Black people in America. But even over time, the more time you spent in American politics, seeing like some of the changes that Dwayne talked about, like how they slowly see you coming in and making some sort of progress, and they start changing the pieces a little bit. I think even over time, he talked about how, you know, when you infiltrate the system, eventually you start getting swallowed up and digested inside that system. And even, I know there were a lot of revolutionaries from the 70s, like a lot of them now, those are still living. A lot of them even changed their views on a lot of things. So you have that split where some of them, they stay radical all the way to the grave. And those are the ones like, you know, your Sada Shakur's, you know, and a lot of the incarcerated Black Panthers, you know, who still put like H. Rap Brown, and a lot of them, they still stick to, you know, what they were believing in the 70s and practicing like Black nationalism and community building, uplifting, and dismantling of the system. Where you have a lot of those, you know, a lot of people kind of give me flack when I talk about Angela Davis. You know, a lot of their views kind of change. You know, you start seeing that a lot of these like former revolutionaries, they become professors of college institutions or whichever it may be. They work for institutions that we would say are inherently racist. So by doing that, their views slightly change as well. They're not as radical as they once were. Eldridge Cleaver running for president, you know, like obviously Eldridge Cleaver was a major part of that split, you know, with the Panther Party. And, you know, a lot of them, you know, like Eldridge Cleaver at the time, he was considered a nut, you know, a nutcase. I think Huey P. Newton, a lot of them, I think the main idea that they try to go by with that is maybe if we try to get into like a council position, you know, at least that's something, that's a local start. And you can try to implement those things within your community. But even with that, and I'm sure like Yasmin, you'll ask this question later, but like even with the like local politics, even some of that kind of gets compromised because like there are leaders that we know here in Cleveland, before they got into politics, they were very revolutionary and Black nationalists in mind. And once they got into a local seat or whatnot, a lot of that kind of changed for them. Like they started speaking very differently. So like I've noticed that once you actually get into the system, those once radical views that you really had, they start to diminish over time. That's one thing that I've noticed.
Does Biden have Black voters in his interest, or is it the matter of using the race tension in the United States as a means to gain the Black vote, as a means to kind of you know, steer Black people towards him? Do you think that's true, or do you think that any of the presidential candidates are kind of using the race tensions in the United States to gain votes?
On the question of just voting and not voting, I think it's a false choice because the black vote is only as effective as it's organized. So if you just show up to vote or you show up to not vote and you don't do shit for 4 years, but vote that one day, it's not very effective on either side of the bar. I would argue in the situation we're in, it would probably be better to vote. And I have a lot of people I hang out with are in a disagreement with that, but I'm saying I would argue it would be better, but I'm saying It's not an organized vote, as in we don't deal with our neighbors, the people live in our communities, and we don't understand the issues that we're dealing with and how to organize around them. And we're not doing things proactively to create hell on the ground for politicians. There's only so much that voting is going to get done. And if we study our history of Black people, the times in which voting has been effective at all, or when we've gotten anything done, is when we've had moves behind to get these things done. When we're just showing up every 4 years or every 6 years, whatever, to galvanize everybody. So because this is the existential crisis, the world's going to come to an end if we don't vote, and they do the fear mongering every year. And I agree, this is a serious election. But I'm just saying, like, there's not an organized capacity to vote, or an organized capacity of Black people, and it has to be more local than it's going to be national, because everybody's issues aren't the same. You know, you were talking about Cleveland, it's a majority Black city. In Indianapolis, we have 30% Black people, so we're going to have to approach that a little bit differently. And then another thing is there's also class issues we have to address within the Black community. So there's Black people who have different interests, and they can protect and they usually tend to be at the top of the food chain within the Black world, and their interests aren't the same as poor Black people. You know, it's poor Black people who are going to get killed by the police more than likely than it is people who are on the higher end of the food chains. It's poor Black people who are going to have most of those interactions with the police. So it's not as much in the interest of other Black people who may not be in those situations to do anything about it, because it's not something they deal with as much as the ones of us who might be in poverty, who dealing with the police as often. So I'm saying, like, we don't have a movement, if we don't have an organized capacity, there's only so much voting or really any one thing you do once a day. That literally doesn't make sense. You're gonna do something like one day every 4 years, and that's gonna have any impact. So politicians respond to pressure, and pressure is affected by collective action, not by one person or individuals. And there's also the issue of money. And that's why often the people who live in one district get their shit fixed, because they have money and they donate to these campaigns. They have businesses that can literally leave the city if they don't get their way. They can punish the entire population if they don't get their way. So the only way Black people can combat that is to be organized. If you're not organized, because a lot of times we work at these places, so maybe we can go on strike. There's all different types of things we can do to put pressure. But if we can't do that, then I don't think voting or not, it's not really gonna matter. So to the question of Biden, and I don't think Biden's necessarily playing on racial tension. I mean, I think some of his past laws helped create racial tension, but I don't think he's playing on it necessarily. I think that's more so Trump who's like playing into that. I think Biden has most of the Black vote because that's who Black people tend to vote for. And he also can say, I was, friends with the Black guy, the former president. He has that at his discretion. So I don't think he's necessarily playing into the tension. I think he's just a Democratic candidate. So he's going to have the Black vote by and large, but he does need to do more to get the numbers up.
Somebody like Biden, to answer the question, it's like the good old boys, we had all these candidates from every nationality, both genders. We even had someone that was part of the LGBTQIA plus community running for that seat. And then it comes down to these old white men, because it's about maintaining the status quo. Now, as far as like voting, between the two, we're that old adage of picking the lesser of the two evils. It's about, well, we got to vote for somebody because, we don't want to keep Trump in there, but, what other alternative do we have? And see, in the past, we had alternatives, we had ourselves. But as what was stated by the gentleman earlier, is that it's about a question of intent, and it is a question of what is gained with whatever decision that is made. Mm-hmm. Now, as far as like voting by itself, as what was also said, it's not enough. Yeah. Okay. We have to vote in every level of government, not just at the presidential level, because look at it, the very definition of presidency is to preside over. Mm-hmm. So he is just the figurehead at the top of entire parliament. You see what I'm saying? So while everyone is talking about, well, what's going to happen with the Black people, you know, in our communities, in our cities, and in our states, it goes back to what are we willing to do for our cities and our states? Are our much affluent Blacks in America going to step up and help our less affluent? Are we going to have a better communicative support in our educational system? I mean, I myself, and Kel knows this because I've been involved not only with our colleges, but I've been involved with high schools as well. I mean, something as simple as passing our issue in Cleveland, issue 68. Now, everybody is on the fence with that. You know, should we say yes? But then where's the money going to go? Is it really going to go into schools? But if we say no, then we don't get the funding and therefore our schools are left stuck. You see what I'm saying? But it wouldn't be stuck if we had community and parental support. These days, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kel, there are a lot of parents who are not getting as involved in education and in their communities and the city as they were when we were growing up, you know? Partially because of systemic oppression. Part of it is because of economics. And some of it is because in a lot of cases, we have younger and younger parents and they're required to leave their homes and work these crazy hours, you know, and they're not even home for their kids anymore. So when you're talking about voting from a socio-political perspective is relative. You know, that vote has to go far enough that will help your community, help your city, help your state, and in turn help the country. If we're only helping in certain pockets, we can't complain about what's not being done.
I think 55 years of the Voting Rights Act has shown us that voting doesn't solve all of our problems. But I can tell you from experience that for us to not vote won't solve any problems either. Since voting's not enough, we're always going to have to couple that with other forms of action, economic. But voting is not going to stop police officers from shooting our kids. We're going to have to find some other way to stop that. It's just, you know, Cleveland's a majority Black city. It's got a Black mayor. The majority of the city council is Black. That was the case when Tamir Rice was shot. That's been the case since. You know, East Cleveland. We're going to talk about East Cleveland.
Oh boy.
I mean, it's a majority Black municipality. It's got majority of its elected officials are Black. East Cleveland, you know, I've been there. Parts of it look like Beirut. So just Blacks voting doesn't solve the problem. And when we get further down the conversation on some of the other bullet points, we can address the impact of Black votes on elections.
Once you do vote, it's up to the people to hold these elected officials accountable. And you can hold them accountable. It is not just about money holding them accountable. I remember back in the day where I was dragged to street club meetings. I was dragged to city council meetings. You know, you can go on YouTube and you can watch city council meetings that go on all around this country of people who get in the face of their local elected leaders and hold them accountable for the things that they do and don't do. And I think we as a people do not do that. You know, we see these other races of people up in the faces of these people, demanding things, demanding changes in their community. And we don't do that.
Why do you think that is?
We don't.
Why do you think that is?
Because the biggest thing is that we can't come together amongst ourselves.
Okay.
Like when it comes to accountability of elected officials, we got to also dive into the fact that a lot of these politicians, and the reason why a lot of people like pretty much gravitate to a lot of them is because of popularity, and it's because of identity politics. And when you get so caught up in identity and popularity, now it's like when somebody does point out or try to hold them accountable for something, you get this constant backlash. You get this feedback that is like, don't you dare attack, you know, this councilman, that's a good brother, he doing this, he did this. But then when you point out a flaw, you know, that is pretty much present for everybody to see, there's some type of backlash to that. I think the main thing you see that with is like Barack Obama. You criticize Barack Obama because of Black people, what's gonna happen? You're gonna get hella a lot of backlash. And to me, that's like why I feel like when you have like when voting time comes and you see all this pandering to Black people, and I always say over the previous years, it's like they know that we, for some reason, we're caught up in symbolism more so than politics. I feel like a lot of our community is not very well versed in like politics and what you should get out of politics and policies. I think for the most of it is mainly so, like Barack Obama, it was, all right, he's Black and he kind of understands the culture. You know, you see him like linking up with a lot of top hip hop artists and NFL players and NBA players and whatnot. I remember watching an interview with Jamil Hill, and she talked about how, you know, like during elections, like the Republicans, like Black conservatives, they'll use people to be like pawns or whatnot, as if like the Democrats don't do the same thing. And that's the majority of the reason why like a lot of us vote for them. When you start getting into a lot of the things that are kind of negative in Obama's history, you know, those are things that you can't dare to touch on. When you talk about the police brutality and the things that happened under Barack Obama's watch, when you talk about even the foreign affairs, you know, you got a lot of human activists or Pan-Africans. When you talk about the bombs dropped over Muslim countries or African countries, like those things are kind of like bad odds to that. Like, don't talk about Barack Obama because we got to deal with all the other white racist politicians, as if a lot of Black politicians don't uphold white supremacy themselves. And I feel like with that symbolism, that's kind of what we get. We kind of fall into that because we fall so blind to, okay, we got a Black president, we got this Black mayor, we got this Black chief of police, you know, here in Cleveland. But all of them do things to uphold white supremacy. And then when you do try to hold those people accountable, you get all this constant backlash. So I feel like a lot of that is because of like identity politics. Like you kind of starting to see the same thing with Kamala Harris that like I pointed out with Barack Obama. Like you can't criticize any of them because then you get so much constant backlash and you kind of outcast it. And then also going into, you know, being more than just a vote, when you try to get people to, hey, join this grassroots movement. Look what this grassroots movement is doing for the community. A lot of them, hey, you get undermined. You're not on that pedestal because I guess you don't have this big name, you know, and I feel like a lot of activists who they'll say, oh, I don't vote, but look at all this other work that I've been doing for years and years. It's nonstop, everyday work. And it's like, well, dang, you criticize this person for, oh, he didn't vote for the presidential election, but then you just undermine all the community work he's been doing within that community. And it's as if all of that means nothing. It's the president is the end all be all. And I think that voting for this election, and even in the 2016 election when it came to Donald Trump, voting just for or analyzing the problem as a Trump problem, I think it's a problem within itself, because now you're ignoring the whole system. The system produced Trump. The system is what's running every other elected official that you could possibly think of. Like, I always say that Donald Trump didn't do anything that any other president before him didn't do. They all do the same dirt, all right? You got neoliberalism where some it just looks different because of the colors different or the swag is different. And then you got those like Donald Trump, who I believe was elected because the hierarchy of white supremacy is the patriarchy. Regardless whether Hillary Clinton was was the more well-versed politician or whatnot, is the fact that when you think about white supremacy, Donald Trump, he fits that head mold, that head white male mold of that. And I feel like that's the main reason why Donald Trump won that election. And even in this election, Joe Biden is the obvious, more well-versed politician. I would say he's the better imperialist when it comes to things like that. But I feel like Donald Trump definitely appeases to what the white supremacist system really embodies and what it is.
I just
Dwayne?
Yeah, I wanted to respond. Who's next?
Dwayne and
Yeah,
Charmaine.
I kind of wanted to come from a non-voter perspective, because I feel like there's the reason I don't vote is because of the same reason like my brother Two Black say, you know what I'm saying? Like, we're not prepared for that. We're not ready for that. Like, what we bring, if we bring 1 million people to the polls, what are we bringing? Literally nothing. We literally just wasting resources, money, time. If you put them same resources, money, time into your own community, into building up the businesses within our community, building up the community centers, the stuff that we built, that we tend to look at like, oh, that's not working. So I'm gonna go on to the next thing. Like when we were at Cleveland State, oh my goodness, man, we used to have like weekly meetings, community meetings about getting so much stuff in order, and we were getting stuff in order. We were actually had action, but once the election and all that stuff came, everybody disappeared. Everybody got on the Obama wagon, everybody got on the Democratic wagon, and it's just like all power from the Black neighborhood just disappeared. And this happens every 4 years. And this is coming from a person who's deeply involved in Black nationalism. When elections come, Black community meetings are empty unless they're democratic, unless they're about an election or these politics. That's when everybody just forsakes everything we're doing from the past 4 years, for the past 80 years since we've been doing this voting thing, and since we moved on and went back and moved on and went back, we just like, we're fighting the same battle over and over again. Like, that's literally the definition of insanity. Like, and until we can, like my brother Two Black says, until we can have a legit like position in there to where we've organized enough, we brought enough resources, which to add, we at this point, we have enough resources and numbers to escape any of this stuff that we're going through right now at this moment. We just don't have unity to do it. But if we were to just start on small levels, like, because there are actual organizations that are actually working, that are actually doing things. Like, what country has voting free? None. But what countries have, how many countries have Black nationalism free? Many. Like, we have things that are working, and it's just that we don't, like I was saying before we get cut off, a lot of us don't want that smoke. Yeah. We don't want to make that sacrifice to, okay, I might have to leave this mug for a little bit to go build in Ghana to get some power. I might have to like leave my job and go join this community organization to do some real stuff. I might have to take up arms. Yep. This is real. What revolution have you seen without arms? Which revolution have you seen without some ruckus? I ain't saying we should pick up arms because they probably do us in because we ain't unified, but like, we have to look at history to know what we got to do. History got it written out for us in a blueprint. It's just that we have kind of given up because we look at them killing us and them beating us and us using these horrible methods. We look at that as we lost. We look at that as failure. That ain't failure, that's just evil. That's just evil. And for a person to like I've been on these Facebook, like I've had people like my aunties and uncles and cousins that I haven't seen in years, haven't supported nothing I've done or anything, just come about the woodwork and just bash me fully for saying I'm not voting for Biden or Trump. You know what I'm saying? And then it's like, it gets to the point where they can't even understand what I'm saying right in front of them. I'll literally say like, F Trump, F Biden. Oh, you're a Trump supporter. Oh, you don't matter. You need to vote or die. Like, that ain't helping us. That's helping nobody. That's an old method from before the civil rights movement. Politicians been using that. Politics has been the worst, most corrupt thing in American history since it started. Yeah. There's even before, back in ancient Greece and Rome, politics has always been corrupt. And you know what people do about it? They uprise and they take over. And that's what we need to do. We need to withdraw and build within our communities, not withdraw all the way, because you always got to know what your enemy doing. So we're gonna need people. We still need people studying the voting system. We still need people studying all this. We still need people involved in all aspects. That's why I was saying, like with Brother Carter, like I was agreeing to everything he said. Like most of it is the addition to which after we came back, he pretty much said that too. So it's like, that's literally the answer. Like, we have to stop supporting a system. Like, the lesser of two evils is still supporting evil. And if you submit, no matter if they beat you to submit or you just chose to submit, if you submit to a system that's holding you down, what is that? I'm not gonna put a word on it, but that's just the situation we in. If you submit into a system that historically that you know, there's nothing you can say to prove that the system hasn't done us wrong. And we don't have to prove to anybody in this chat. But what is the actions? Do you keep just like, okay, it's gonna work one day? It's gonna work one day. Is that where we at?
I mean, to kind of like look at it from sort of a different but the same perspective, this is why we are also caught in a quandrum, because it goes back to what I said. It's not only about quote unquote not want no smoke, but it also comes down to complacency. You know, there was a point in time where we couldn't even go to certain cities. We couldn't go to certain towns. You know, there was, I mean, me personally, I think integration was like the biggest mistake in since the United States inception. That's just me. But, you know, you couldn't integrate with the quote unquote oppressor. And I think that the mistake that has been made, especially with Black people over the years, is trying to be equal to the oppressor. And then you have to define that. What are you being equal to? You know, when it comes down, again, piggybacking again to voting solely isn't going to be the answer to everything. It goes back to what everyone has said. It has to be unity. It has to be a utilitarianist thought. Are you willing to make a sacrifice for the greater good of your people? And the sad part about the thing is, going back to Dr. Joy DeGruy and Dr. Michelle Alexander with the new Jim Crow and post-traumatic slave syndrome, there is so much embedded in our people since the United States inception and before then in colonization, that it would probably take maybe another century or a couple of centuries or maybe even half of a millennia, you know, to get back to the way that things should be. Because the pushback you're going to get is, okay, well, you saw what happened with Black Wall Street. You saw what happened with the MOVE movement. You saw what happened with the Black Renaissance. You saw what happened with Marcus Garvey when he was like, screw it, let's all go back to Africa, you know, because you always got the one sellout that's going to infiltrate and grab information, zip it back to the system, and then we're right back to square one. You know, if we're going to make an uprising and we are going to make a revolution, we have to have individuals that are of like mind, and those that are not, it might sound a little harsh and extreme, but they have to be eliminated. It's not about talking to them. It's not about reasoning with them. You just got to wipe them out, because that is what white folks have done over millennia. If they see somebody betraying them or any kind of mutiny on the bounty, they eliminate them. Our problem is we're too forgiving. Our problem is we're trying to find the easiest way out without having to deal with the hardest consequence. You know, I live in a neighborhood now. I live on the west side of Cleveland, where it's extremely diverse, where all around me are different people from different nationalities and immigrants. To show you how the community doesn't support each other, when I stayed on the east side, where it was majority Black, my house kept getting broken into. People were messing with my kids, blase skip. I move on the west side with people who can't even speak English, and they're trying to tell me stuff about, you know, what my kids have done, if my kids are in trouble, do I need help going home, this, and this. You know, it was a sense of community here, you know, that I just didn't see anymore when I started having children being on the east side. So, you know, I want to be able to do and participate in the revolution, but my largest issue, and I'll be honest with you, my largest fear is the person that's going to take me out, because I know I could be extreme. I know it. The person that's going to be taking me out is a person that looks like me. I don't even have to worry about a white person. You know, what if a Black person that is figuring, well, I have my house on the hill, I've got my wife, I got my kids, I got my car, I've got my ideal freaking job, and she wants me to walk away from this for something that quote unquote has nothing to do with me? No, I got to find a way to break her down. And that is where the problem lies. You know, we can say all day, oh, well, all we got to do is have a revolution. Well, the problem here is, if people have different intentions and people have different modes of thought according to what they get out of the deal, I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. We're never going to come together the way that we need to. You know, when we had our marches and you know what happened with George Floyd, you remember, Kel, we right there in the thick of it. You know, we saw the instigators messing with folks, and look what happened 2 weeks later, business as usual. You know, I'm trying to talk to council people. I'm trying to talk to community. Oh, I'm just another disgruntled individual. You know, I don't need to be saying anything because, you know, at the end of the day, I got a job. I got a family to feed. I got bills to pay. You know, when you got something going up against that, you know, how on God's green earth now when this freaking generation are you going to counter that, you know, unless we have a fallback method, unless we have a bunker at every house we at. So if something does jump off, we got to go underground. None of us have that. We're not even prepared to have a revolution right now. We're not.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry,
What up?
Brother Black, was you getting ready to say something? Because I'll yield.
Oh, sorry.
No.
I think it was Too Black and Charmaine also had something to say a little while back. So if you speak to that.
Yeah, there's a lot to. Everybody said some great shit though. But yeah, I think where to start. I was gonna get something earlier. I get that Black people are not we frustrate each other, you know, obviously. But at the same time, I think it's important to still give ourselves some credit. I will just want to bring that back into the conversation. Like, I mean, I have a lot of criticisms of Black Lives Matter. I could go down the list, but it did happen. You know what I mean? And it has brought us here. It has changed the conversation. It has made it to where we can even, I mean, like Dwayne, like I know how you feel, like people like us we were just completely wiped out off the map. And once upon a time, now you bringing people back into the conversation that never could be in these convos. You have people who can bring up more radical ideas. And I mean, when I was in college when Obama ran for president, and I think something that Kel said to his point, like, you couldn't say anything about Obama. If you said, you know, like, it was a mob, you know what I mean? Like, you get killed by Black people, like, they didn't want to hear it, you know? So it's like, the Black Lives Matter and just Black people that even have supported it have brought a lot of issues to the forefront that gives us an opportunity to even have this discourse. So I know we talk about we're not unified and all of that, but that's not a new problem, honestly. And I know we like to romanticize, not necessarily people on this call, but I hear people all the time romanticize the 60s. But even if you go back and read like Stokely Carmichael, he specifically said, or Kwame Ture specifically said, like, Black people are mobilized, but we're not organized. And I think people misconstrue the two. So you can be mobilized in the sense that you show up to the protests, or you show up to vote, you show up to these big events and you put in your work, and, you know, everybody posts their pictures that they did at the protests, that they voted. But like that day-to-day event we were talking about, like Dwayne was getting at, ain't nobody there. Or, you know, or people are there, but they're not necessarily engaged, because we've been taught around these like large spectacle events. And I don't just blame that on Black people. That is how politics organizes itself in this country. It organizes around spectacle, around big events, around one big day. We spend a year and a half to get to one day to vote. And the parties don't spend a lot of time building up that day-to-day power that communities need to even contest for whatever their issues are. And that's not an accident. So that's always been a problem. And I think Black people, if we're saying Black people are as oppressed as we are, then we're not going to be perfectly organized individuals. Like, we have to give ourselves that grace. We're going to appear literally backwards sometimes. Like, that's going to happen because that's what we've experienced. Now, that doesn't mean that you just let that slide, or it's just like whatever. Like, no, like, we got to keep working. But at the same time, like, Black people have been stripped of so much, have worked so hard, like we've noted, to get voting rights, and then they get cut down, you know, like, I mean, why are we standing in line for 6 hours? You know what I'm saying? Like that. So if somebody doesn't want to stand in line for 6 hours, especially if they're disabled or whatever their issue is, or they can't get off work, or I can't be like, oh man, you don't care about Black people, or you lazy. Like, it's tough. So I'm saying, like, there just needs to be some nuance, I guess, just having some grace for us. But at the same time, I still agree, like, we got to be accountable. We can't just, you know, if sometimes it does come down to potentially taking somebody out or moving them off the chessboard, however you want to define that. If we're trying to get something done, especially if you are in community with me, like if you're in the organization I'm in and you're a problem, like, you need to be removed if you're hurting the rest of the community. Because like we've talked about, we've had people it's rarely the person that's just randomly on the street that's not bothering anybody. It's usually somebody who is technically active, that betrays us. It's not somebody that, you know, it's not somebody that's just going to work smoking weed all day. They're not bothering nobody. It's somebody in our organization who, you know, who snitches, who steals money, who, you know, who's messing with the women or something. There's always that person or those people. So we have to definitely tighten our ranks. But at the same time, I just want to say we do need to give ourselves grace, because if we don't have that grace when we go out into the streets and when we talk to each other, we'll want to quit. So I understand the frustration, trust, like, but I'm just saying, like, it's important to have.
It's
say what?
It's that from what it sounds like, we're all kind of acknowledging that, you know, we've come far, but we've got a long way to go. And so far in regards to like unity and organization, and that's something that people don't really think about, because at the end of the day, like the Black community, I think you touched about Black Lives Matter, like I have criticism of them as an organization, but they have kind of raised awareness, which is good. But yeah, organization is definitely the Black community's problem that we still have to try to overcome. Charmaine, you had something to say a little bit a while back.
Yeah, I'm gonna try my best to make this really brief. First of all, you know, with regards to the unity and everything like that, I touched on it before when I spoke about, you know, this is the reason why we can't come together to accomplish our goals politically. But another thing, I kind of take issue with what I'm hearing respectfully about how this ideology about how we need to move people out of the way that's causing harm to the struggle. I take issue with that, because how can we say this when we have people that are causing harm to our community knowingly, and we're not doing anything about it now? You can't put this on the politician when you have, you know, those of us that look like us doing great harm to our community now, and you walk right by them. We walk right by them. So we can't have this attitude we can't have that attitude selectively. You know, you have those of us out, you have those that look like us out here robbing, killing, stealing, raping, molesting. We have those in our own family that we will not address. But you rather address someone who you feel is not valuable to a struggle to overtake or overthrow the government. I mean, not the government, but the system. I don't like that.
I want to clarify. I just want to, when you're done, I just want to clarify what I was saying, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, and I'm not attacking anyone. I'm just, you know, maybe I do need clarification.
You're good, sis.
Okay, so yeah, we can't be selective in that idea, in those ideals. So that was just the one point, and yes, I do welcome the clarification on that. Also, when it comes to symbolism in politics, yes, we do have, and I admit, yes, I will get you about Kamala Harris. I really would, and the main reason being is because as African American or as Black people, the biggest problem that we have when it comes to attacking the records of politicians is that we don't understand the basic operations of government to accurately attack the records of politicians. I do not understand how Barack Obama can be blamed for police brutality towards Black people when he is the president of the United States, and that he doesn't have the power to come down and just say, stop it. There are things that must happen on different levels of the government. And yes, while I do understand as a president, he does have certain powers, we have to be able to educate and have to be willing to learn and listen on what different functions that different people have within the different parts of government. Same thing with respect to Kamala Harris. She was the district attorney. She was the attorney general. Attorney generals and district attorneys do not sentence people to jail. They try cases. They have executive office when it comes to executing law enforcement. They do not purposefully sentence people or lock people up. So it's that rhetorical criticism that you hear regurgitated and repeated throughout especially the Black community, that is kind of like just overworked. And so when I do hear someone says, "Oh, Kamala locked up Black people," I take umbrance to that because that is factually untrue.
Interesting.
And to my last point, oh God, I'm done. I'll just.
Shawn, you have anything? Shawn,
Okay, go ahead.
Shawn, then
Brother
Dwayne,
Black wanted to do a clarification first, so I was going to let him have his clarification.
On the few things on the taking
about
out
to move
part.
people and move
On
people
taking
out.
on the taking out part, I was more so reinforcing the idea if you're organized, you deal with the problems in your community. So I don't really disagree with you on that. That's what I was getting at. Not this kind of romanticized idea of revolution where I'm just going to shoot somebody for fun or because they're in front of my idea. Like, no, I'm talking about a very materialist, real life thing. So if it is somebody in your family or somebody in the community, and I'm not even saying that has to be violence for the record, especially some being recorded. I'm just saying that if it's I'm just saying like if people are organized, if you have an organized family, because I know families where they don't call the police, but if something goes down, they take care of that, whatever that is, and because their family within a unit is organized and they punish, and we do this all the time, and we take care of problems in our families all the time without, at least we have stronger enough families, we take care of those problems without calling any third party into it. As far as the just quickly respond to people who criticize the Black politicians, in all fairness, with Obama, he can't directly affect the police on the ground in a given municipality, but it is true that his administration fought court cases that would have federal cases, they fought cases where they would have allowed to extend or the amount of, I guess, leeway that police have. They fought in support of that when they could have reversed it, where police didn't have as much leeway. That is something that Obama did. And then that is a direct policy connection. I could send the links in there because basically the police have the ability to shoot someone with the discretion that they have based upon certain statutes set by the courts, and the federal government under Eric Holder fought those precedents to make sure that the police remain to have that type of latitude. That's just a fact. So there are things sometimes that these people can in fact, as far as Kamala Harris, like, yes, the job is to lock people up. I think some people just have a problem with that job in and of itself, regardless of who occupied it. But yeah. So go ahead, Mr. Carter.
Shawn?
Or were you going to respond? I'm sorry.
Oh, well, no, I just meant from a counter-revolutionary perspective, number one, and then number two, lastly, and I'm sorry, Mr. Carter, and number two, lastly, send me that because I'm very interested to see about that. And then lastly, Kamala, you have to realize the grave damage that you're doing to that it's doing to our youth who want to pursue careers in law enforcement, to hear and see those things that are being said about Kamala and other individuals that are being attacked for their records in law enforcement because they're colored, because they're of color.
Okay. Okay, I was going to circle back. I was going to circle back to Dwayne's point, then back to Black's, back to Charmagne's, and then with Dwayne, he talks about revolution, and I just want to throw a statistic out there. I read somewhere there's 420 million firearms in the United States of America, owned primarily by white people. They own 75% of the 400 million firearms and 75% of the 1 trillion, with the T, rounds of ammunition out there. So if we're going to go the revolutionary route, we have to account for the fact that they have all the guns and we don't.
You probably need allies. Yeah.
I mean, we may reach a point. I mean, we should be seriously considering the likelihood that, depending on how this election goes and what outcomes come from that election, we may be going down the road to civil war, and we may have to start educating and arming our own people to address that. And I'm no gunslinger, but I understand that if they all got guns and they don't want us to go, and they don't want to go quietly, there's going to be some conflict. And we need to figure out a way to deal with that conflict. And some of that's going to come down to us being armed. So that's what I have to say about revolution.
We have to clarify the revolution, man. Like, people, like, we've gotten into this mindset. We don't give no credit to the revolution, even though the revolution got us here where we're at right now. When you think of the revolution, people just think now of like some crazy black dude on the corner talking about, hey, let's take up arms against the government. No, the revolution was Marcus Garvey, Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. I mean, we can keep going. That's the revolution, and that's what people are still going on. But people that kind of shifted away from the revolution, they want to downplay it as much as you can, like with anything black, music, business, whatever black folks have successful, it is downplayed. And the revolution is still being downplayed. Like, people don't even think it has any strength in the fight. When we got this far because of the revolution, Black Lives Matter was not an organization. They took the name and rolled with it. Black Lives Matter was black people waking up and tearing stuff up like, hey, we ain't taking this no more. But what happened? The politicians took over and it became something else. And now Black Lives Matter is basically a political organization. Like, it ain't even political, it's a democratic organization. Like, I know the people, I know a lot of people personally, because I've been on the front lines. That's where we have to clarify the revolution. We don't give no credit to black people, and we giving all this credit to the politicians, talking about Biden's not this, Biden's not that. There's video of this guy like playing with children's nipples, and this is video. This ain't like somebody saying, oh, this dude might have did this. This is video. Like, I mean, and that's just little stuff. Like, we can bash, trash them. We can definitely bash and trash politicians, but it's like, you can't take your eye off the prize because they didn't send a decoy in front of you. Like, I don't know if y'all remember the video when Obama became president, and it was this viral video of this lady coming out like, oh, I don't have to pay bills no more. I don't have to pay my car note no more. Like, and she was just so happy. It's like, what? Like, that's what they doing to us. Like, it's literally a game, and like, we just the pawns getting played with. And it's like, it has to come to a point where you say, no, I'm not playing your game no more. Like, you might look at them and be scared because you see numbers. We really got numbers. This ain't just a Cleveland fight. This ain't just an Ohio fight. This is a global fight. There are literally people over in Africa right now, like, please connect with us. Please, like, bro, we got countries that are the fastest growing countries in the world because of the revolution. But you get here to the US, people like, yeah, the revolution, we can't really do that. If we pick up guns, they're gonna take us out. It ain't all about guns. The revolution is a 1,000-year plan. Like, we got like 1,000 years of information to build upon, but we throw it all away because we like, that ain't gonna work with the white man. That ain't gonna work with white supremacy, and it ain't gonna work. And you've got to vote it down. All this, like, big question. When has the hood changed in the last 80 years? Besides when we got integrated.
When we burnt it down.
Exactly. Was any of that because of a vote?
Kel,
was any of that because of a president that we put in?
When we burnt down the hood in 1968, they left it that way.
So I want to throw in just because it was something you said, Dwayne, that made me think about like, even when we do the whole, or we voted for a Democratic base, president and stuff like that. My thing is, the other day I pondered the question, what's something that Republicans and Democrats will never disagree on? When we talk about like revolution and stuff like that, part of the reason why it would be an uphill battle of trying to dismantle the system, because when we do vote Democrats, they not dismantling the system is not something they're gonna do. They still uphold imperialists, just like Republicans agree on, warmongering, just like they agree on. You talked about connecting overseas to like our African brothers and sisters. What about AFRICOM? Who funds that? Who supports that? You know what I'm saying? What about that military budget? Joe Biden, he's not cutting that. You know what I'm saying? So when you think of all those things right there, it's like, okay, like when we think of politics, we think of obviously just the thing that's going to directly affect us. When we talk about like the whole like health insurance and things like that, but then when you start advancing to the whole, like, damn, like it ain't even like the politicians are just pawns to this. Like, because that's the point that I've gotten to. And I think that's the reason why when I talk about like voting, and I say well, like voting for people is like, you know, it's iffy because those are pawns. Like, we know they're not even really the ones that's running the game. You know, people talk about, oh, Russian bots and Russians rigging the elections. They don't even make mention of Israel. And Israel was really controlling our politics. And all those wealthy lobbyists and corporations in this country, that's really what's dictating that. But you don't ever hear them mention, you know, like Zionists and Zionism and things like that. Barack Obama, I believe, I can't remember the exact number, but he actually aided Israel before he even left office. And Trump, Biden, Kamala, all the other politicians that come in, you will never hear them talk bad about supporting Israel's military and their funding and things as such. So even when you start talking about how like Black people are the majority in the globe, and part of the Black revolution is it can't just be Black Americans, because obviously at this point we'll get wiped out. Ain't enough of us. That's why we gotta have alliances. And Malcolm touched on that, you know, towards later in his life when he talked about, you know, you can't just have a civil rights movement, because when there's a civil rights movement, you're limiting yourself within that jurisdiction. You got to make it a human rights thing. And white supremacy is a human rights problem. And we can acknowledge that Black people, you can't go nowhere in the world and not see a Black person. We outnumber them. But then when we support political parties that uphold militaries that disenfranchise those Black countries and that Black continent, they support gutting them of their resources, things of that such. Haiti, you know, like I think one of the reasons why Hillary Clinton also got to get a big rap during that election because what her and the Clintons, what they did to Haiti and the funding.
Rice.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, and then like with Obama and Hillary, and they talked about Libya, you talk about Gaddafi and stuff like that. How can we have a Black global revolution when we still support political parties that, you know, like, yeah, their message is liberal for Americans, but overall, like, they politics and policies, they uphold in that exact system that we talk about dismantling.
Right. I think it's because I think we don't understand what they actually putting into this. Like, they spent billions of dollars on psychologists and colleges that to actually manipulate us into this. And that's where I wanted to address, like, with what my sister was saying. Like, with all due respect, we got to stop just like every time a politician is on the spot, we got to stop shifting it off to blaming Black people. Like, that's a tactic. That's a long lasting tactic. Whenever like, oh, Biden's a pedophile and all of this and that. Well, what about the dude that just robbed me, that shot up the corner store, and what about Jimmy who drinking and he be messing with kids and all this? Yeah, we got to address all of that. Like, I can tell you right now, there's not one majority Black city in the U.S. that doesn't have a group that's out there protesting violence, Black on Black violence. I can tell you, I can link you with many of people. Right here in Cleveland, we got Al Porter, Black on Black crime. Like, they out here every day. So you can't discredit them people. Like, people are out here every day making differences in people's lives. Differences that I seen personally that I personally haven't seen a vote do. Like, I've personally not seen these politicians do the stuff that I've seen grassroots people doing, because these grassroots people, they aren't in that boundary of political games. And that's what we need to focus our energy on. If we keep focusing our energy on political games, we just gonna be political pawns, and we gonna keep defending the white oppressor, and we gonna keep downing our own people. We gonna keep downing, like, we gonna keep saying everybody in the hood bad. Everybody in the hood ain't bad. Like, I live on the street with everybody's a homeowner. Like, down the street's pretty bad though. Like,
Can I jump in real quick?
We ain't gonna discount that, but there are people making change. Like, there's change happening, and like for us to just completely dismiss that we're doing nothing, that we have to put all our resources into this vote, that's counter-revolutionary. That's counter proactive to our people.
In regards to like symbolism and how people, you know, see the politicians, how do you feel in regards to that? Like, do you think that we should, you know, a lot of people saying Kamala Harris is, you know, she's wearing the Timbs, she's trying to appeal to the Black community.
Well, first, First off, Kamala didn't ask for anybody to take a picture of her coming off the plane in Timberland boots. Nobody asked. She didn't ask for that picture to be posted or for the video to be posted on social media. But as soon as it got posted, oh, she's pandering. She's, this, that, and the other. It's another video of her eating greens at a cafe somewhere, and oh my God, she's pandering. So, people, once they make up their mind about something, be that as it may, they'll ride it all the way to the end. I mean, it's on both sides. So that's number one. Number two, as far as the people who don't want to vote, you can submit by omission. And that's just flat out. And that's all I'm going to say. I personally, I do respect Brother Dwayne's framework for not wanting to vote. I do respect it, but do I agree with it? No, but that's his prerogative. Is it going to stop me from trying to galvanize other people to vote? No, it's not, because I'm going to still do me, and I'm still going to vote, and I'm still going to do the best I can to further my community and my people by my ideology. As far as this lesser of two evil game goes, if you know what you're dealing with, you could pick basically lesser of two evil, pick your poison. To me, it's like one and the same thing. But there's no perfect candidate. I think the problem is with a lot of people in politics, they're looking to get their ears tickled more so than anything. You have too many of us that are not willing to do the deep diving that it takes to get to know governmental operations, policy, procedures within government, and so on and so forth. When we have differing ideologies, it turns into more so of a criticism or a ridicule, and I don't think that gets us anywhere. So when I made the statement earlier about how, moving pieces off the chessboard, being counter-revolutionary and things like that, it in no way implied anything to do with we're not doing anything about Black on Black crime in the community, or we're not doing this or we're not doing that. I don't think that statement should have been taken way out there. It was just a thing of, we can't be selective. If you're going to do it as a whole. Also, let's take it back around the block. Let's do this whole Malcolm versus Martin mentality when it came to the events of this summer. You just sat here and said the revolution is holistic. Malcolm and Martin and Marcus Garvey, where you also had those who follow who are also Black Israelites. They were trying to split the two. I'm a Christian, and we were looked down on because all y'all want to do is pray. Whereas we want to take up arms, we're ready to go to war. That doesn't help anything. So, this is what I mean about uniting.
Can I respond to some of that? Just, I'm gonna be quick. But I was writing down some things, because like a lot of what you said, like I'm not trying to play or anything, but I won't lie. I've just heard that from like 50 different people over the last couple of days. And it comes to a point to where it's like people will defend these politicians so much that they'll down their own people, and then like once you retort, it becomes like now it's an attack thing. When one of the major mottos is vote or die, vote or you don't matter. These aren't attacks. These aren't vicious attacks. You don't matter. Black Lives Matter, the movement. Like, and you out here, people out here telling people, I'm not talking about like, right. Which you didn't say that directly, but part of what you said was like some of the same stuff these people been telling me. Like, and that was my last point. Like, we so quick to defend politicians, but we'll downplay anything we are doing. Like, because you're not in my everyday life, you don't comprehend what I'm saying when I'm saying I'm doing more with a vote than a vote. Like, and I don't expect you to comprehend that. I expect you to link with me to try to comprehend that. Like, I've tried to comprehend voting for all my life. Like, all my life. There's nothing you can convince me to say that that's a working system. Like, I can go outside right now. We probably gonna hear gunshots in the next hour or so. And voting has done nothing for that. But we just become too sensitive, man. It's like these political people throwing so many attacks out, and then you throw an attack at their politician, and it's like, oh no, y'all just lying, y'all just doing. Like, if you want to know my true balance of who did better, Trump did better than Obama and Biden. Like, he did better for Black people than Obama and Biden. And I can prove that one time. I can prove that real quick. There are more Black people that open businesses during this little stuff than ever.
Yeah.
There are more people getting paid from unemployment and stimuluses. He's giving Black people more money than anybody ever given them. Does that make him a good candidate? No. Does that make him a good guy? No, because I'm not falling for political tricks. Biden can come up 10 years later and say, oh, no, I didn't really mean y'all were super predators. I didn't really mean to dog Black people all these years. Now that I need y'all, hey, you're not Black if you don't vote for me. I know we all remember that quote.
Yeah, I
You're not Black
that
if you don't vote for me. That's stuff I cannot submit to. I cannot submit to that. And you also said that by omitting, I'm submitting. There's no submission. That's my whole point. There's no submission in me. I'm not submitting to any system. I'm not submitting to your system. That doesn't mean I'm not involved. And that's what I'm saying. Like, we have to comprehend each other. Like, me saying I'm not voting doesn't mean I'm not involved. I guarantee. Like, I won't put that as a boast. I'm not boasting. I'm just keeping it like it is. I guarantee I'm more active than most people you know. Like, and okay, that's just not letting anybody steal my narrative. Like,
I'm sorry. I think you're being a little bit too sensitive, because when I said we can't,
that's the other attack. That's the other attack. It never changes. It's like you can list it down 1, 2, 3, 4. The attacks stay the same. Like, I'm being sensitive because no, I'm not being sensitive. I'm an artist. I'm a rap artist. Anytime I talk,
to get maybe like another.
No, wait, hold on. Let me back it up. When I said we can submit by omission. That had nothing. That was a broad statement. So that was nothing for you to say. How can you say I'm submitting by omission? When I said we can submit by omission,
I can hear what you're saying.
But you didn't seem to hear me state that I respect your framework for not voting. I guess you missed that part. Furthermore,
you missed my part when I said I believe that some of us should be in the voting system.
If possible, can we please just chime in, get some other people to kind of get involved in the conversation? Too Black, I know you wanted to speak a bit while ago. You can either comment.
They need to. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
You can either comment on the Dwayne's and Charmagne's conversation where you lie in that, or you can also comment on another question I also wanted to bring in regards to, the Democratic plantation that Candace Owens keeps on talking about in regards to us always refer, like, it's Democrats. That's literally like vote or die. It's either, vote for the Democrats or not. Or what's your opinion about that, or what Dwayne and Charmagne are discussing?
I mean, if y'all still need to keep talking about it, I was gonna let y'all finish. But like, I'm not even clowning you. Like,
I love it.
No, but no, it was fun to watch. But
not fun.
I didn't mean it that way, but no, it was interesting. No, I think to the question and kind of to what's been said, I was gonna say something earlier. On my podcast, like I said, we typically take a myth and we try to debunk it. So we did an episode. The myth was Democratic Party politics or Black politics. That's being the myth. And so it's to say the opposite, that Black politics are not Democratic Party politics. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be a Democrat. Like, this isn't a either or of that. Like, you know, you have to be like a, you know, extreme to the left or whatever. Like, it's really not the point. And we interviewed Glenn Ford from who runs Black Agenda Report, and he was saying how he was referencing the 60s in this particular episode, how Black politics was movement politics. So we had discussions, we had what we're having right now. You know, we had debates, we went back and forth, and we decided what was best for us and whether we should engage this or whether we should engage that. And we don't always all agree on those things, but I think it's just that point that we can't think of ourselves as Democrats, even if we are working with Democrats. We have to think of things that work in our interests, that benefit us, you know, that benefit the downtrodden. We can't think about ourselves as Democrats. And I do think with some Black people, and this isn't just, when I say that, I'm not directing this on anybody on the call, I'm talking about just in general, some Black people get too caught up in thinking of themselves as Democrats. And that's why we go through this rodeo show where you just kind of like try to beat everybody into submission to vote for your party. And it turns people off, you know, because it's not necessarily, you know, you're not engaging people based on what's necessarily their interest, versus you can bring your party to that conversation and you can tell us what it is. And if people, you know, want to fuck with Joe Biden, excuse my French, that's on them. You know, if they do, that's on them as well. We can have that conversation, but we don't have to be locked in to any like stuck position where anything that doesn't fit that particular standard is always seen as deviant, or you're selling out, or, you know, it doesn't, when we lock into those like hard lines versus being like, look, I stand here, you stand there, you know, we're not going to agree on this. But if you gotta, you know, like even with the conversation just had, like clearly both of y'all are involved and active and informed, you know, regardless of whether y'all are gonna see eye to eye. So I can work with somebody that doesn't vote and we can get plenty of work done on that level. You know, you still might be ready to, you know, show up when it's time to really burn it down, you know, so to speak, you know, and then I can work with somebody who's in the party, you know, who might be at least on a more progressive end, because there might be something that we can address there. Now, some people, yes, you have to be principled, so you don't have to accept everything. You don't just roll with anything, you know, and compromise your morals. But so some things is just like, no, I'm not going that far. Like, if y'all want to do that, I'm not doing that. But, or I'm not dealing with that. Like that is selling out to me. That is neoliberalism. That is, you know, like you can take that position, but it's important to understand, like, we have to really think about ourselves independently and not be caught up on any particular idea or party speaks for us, because those parties in theory are supposed to be representative of constituencies, not the other way around. And, you know, same thing with any like ideological group, you're supposed to be representative of a group, not your ideology itself. So if you're, you know, like if socialism works, then Black people should be willing to support it. If you can't make that make sense for them, then it's not socialism's fault, it's your fault. You're not able to make that make sense for them. So if nobody's supporting it, that's not on the ideology, that's on you as an organizer, that's on you as an activist. And if you're if you're a Democrat and you can't get Black people to roll with it, that's on you. It's on the politicians, it's on the people pushing their messages to influence people to vote. And if people don't want to roll with it, it's opposed to being a situation where it's like, man, you know, these people are sellouts or coons or whatever. Like, I mean, there's people I definitely feel that way about, no doubt. But I'm saying, like, I try to limit that, because at the end of the day, there might be something we can work on, even if I'm not with you on the Biden thing, or I'm not with you on this particular, like, there might be something that we can work on that could still move us forward. And I think that's what's important to think about, is where we can think about it as an independent sense, as opposed to, you know, blue no matter what, or like, I don't really rock with that kind of idea, or like, you know, it has to, or even on the side that I typically align with, you know, it has to be this extra revolutionary thing. Like, sometimes we're not organized enough to even take it there, you know, like, I mean, because I know, like, that's my people. Like, I know that we're not always organized enough to take it there. So it's like, how do we find things that really bring us together while still maintaining our principles and our values to move us forward? You know, that's just how I see it.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. It's clear that obviously there's various opinions and thoughts in regards to politics, in regards to not voting or voting, but it is important that as Black people, sometimes we try to put ourselves into this box, like you have to be this particular way. And the truth is that, unfortunately, we're not all going to have the same opinion. I think that's the reason why sometimes we're not moving as forward like as we should, is because there is various different opinions. I think in all kind of movements, especially the Black community and the Black movement, everyone has their role. You know, you have people like Dwayne on this, like on the ground doing work like that. You have people who like Charmagne, who feels like, you know, she wants to be heard in regards to her vote. There's people who are indecisive. I think everyone has a role to play. Kel, obviously, I was wondering, what's your opinions in regards to, you know, the whole Democratic plantation that Candace Owens says that you like people who vote are, and do you think, just to kind of wrap the whole thing up, do you think that it's important for Black people to vote, or are you more like Dwayne, who thinks that, you know, there's other means to kind of elevate the Black community?
Starting with like Candace Owens, so I've seen that video where she talks about like Black people like being stuck on the Democratic plantation. And she talked about like a lot of like liberal ideologies, and like I've noticed, like what I've seen, like when it comes to revolutionary ideologies or movements, and then you got those who probably are not so revolutionary, and then the ideologies that they have are more so what would be labeled as liberal thinking, I guess you could say. Like, and I think that when it comes to even the politics, we talk about the politics of Black nationalists or the politics of Pan-Africanists, and a lot of that, you know, goes against everything that, you know, this government stands for. So that's why, like, when you go back to like the Huey P. Newtons and all of them, when they got into politics, it's like they wouldn't have gotten in anyway, because knowing what Huey Newton stood for, like that would have never worked. Like none of the stuff that he ever thought ideology-wise would have never took place within this system that we talk about dismantling. And I think that when it comes to like the whole Democratic thing, I think that narrative comes from, you know, I remember when I voted for Obama during the second term, and I remember going to the poll, and I remember my mom telling me, no, just vote all Democrat. You know, and me at the time, only Democrat on the ballot I knew was Obama and Biden. You know, I don't know these other people, but I've been told, like, just vote Democrat. Those are the only ones that do good for Black folks. You know, you kind of get taught that when you kind of come in, you don't really have political knowledge. The only thing you know is Republicans, they're racist, they hate Black people. And, you know, Democrats, they're the only ones who really want to see Black people progress or whatnot. You know, and in a lot of these terms, progressive, left, liberal, a lot of these terms have changed over the years too, because, you know, back then, like the 60s, you know, Malcolm, if you were against the system, you were considered to be left, you know, and then like nowadays, you know, like I'm seeing the whole thing, like you could be left, but you got to be far left or something like that. And but they kind of just change. So like, but Black people, I think, you know, those who don't have that political background, they tend to have that same frame of mind that I had when I like first was able to vote. And it's the Democrats. All we know is that Democrats are good. And then it goes back to the Ballot of Bullet speech that Malcolm X talks about when he talks about, you know, what to do with your vote. And I think the problem is that so many Black people, they just say, go vote. We got to get rid of Trump. Go vote Democrat. Go vote Joe Biden. You know, because the Republicans, they've been making a mess of the country for 4 years. Go vote. They did this to Obama. Go vote. And like again, I said earlier, it takes away from the full analysis of looking at the actual system itself that gave you, you know, the two-party system, that gave you these political parties, that gave you these politicians. You know, it takes away from all of that. And, you know, during that Ballot of the Bullet speech, you know, the thing that sticks out is when Malcolm talked about how, you know, he's always critical of the Democrats. We'll get to the Republicans, but right now it's the Democrats, because for some reason, we can all agree that Republicans now, they ain't shit, racist. We can all agree with that. Don't necessarily have our best interests. He talks about the wolf and the fox. For some reason, when it comes to Democrats, we can't see the smiling in your face. But then once you get behind closed doors, you know, they calling you a nigger again, you know, and they saying all this other, and they start making a lot of politics and political moves that
they steal both canines.
It goes against the message that we were hearing beforehand. You know, like again, like, I remember saying that, like, you know, the message that Kamala Harris or Biden that they give, is a welcoming message. But then when you start getting into the politics of it, when you start seeing a lot of different things, we're talking about police reform, or when Obama was in office, like he made a lot of laws that kind of help protect law enforcement. And I think that's why, like, people, going back to you, Charmaine, when people talked about criticizing Barack Obama about the whole police thing, I think that when you look at like the blue alert law and things of that such, and even, you know, like the talking down on Black people who hit the streets and went to go protest or rioted or whatnot, even the whole talking down on Black people, you know, from being upset about like systematic oppression and stuff like that. That it's the faithfulness to a particular party, and our people as a whole are not very well versed in either the history of some of these parties, the history of the politics, and even after the election is over, like, there's a lot of grown folks who you'll talk to them, they don't watch the news. I don't watch the news. I don't know what's going on in the world. I don't know what's going on in politics. The only time they really watch the news is when there's election time. That's the most they ever watched the news at all. That's the most they ever read news articles or some type of informative site or whatever it may be. It's only when election time. And once that election passes, it goes back to, I don't know, we use words like complacency. We use words like being in la la land. And that's pretty much what it comes back to. And that whole Democratic plantation thing is just that I think Democrats had been the cause for a lot of movements, you know, of being the downfall. We talk about like a lot of those revolutionary movements, liberal ideologies pretty much tainting a lot of revolutionary movements. We've seen it with, for example, I'll give you Kaepernick and even his whole movement in the NFL. You know, it started out real Black, and then people was criticizing that. And then that movement as a whole started accepting very liberal democratic ideologies when it came to Donald Trump. You know, and I think that right there is like just a vague example, but it's things of that such on why, like, things like people will say, well, Black people are enslaved to this Democratic Party or this Democratic plantation. But for some reason, you can see that the wolf is a wolf. A wolf is a predator, but a fox is too. Probably not as vicious as a wolf, but you know, a fox would kill something that's smaller than it. And I think to us, you know, we're like that little pet animal running in the forest, and we see this fox that, you know, you're not as big as a wolf, but you know, so you can't be that bad, you can't be that harmful, and then you find out that this thing got teeth, you know, and that's what happens with Black people, I feel.
What do you think in regards to, you know, either boycotting or, you know, supporting the presidential election in regards to the Black community? And also you can feel free to comment on Harris as well.
Well, I think that folks should vote too, because it's a bigger dynamic than just, you know, whether or not, you know, we should vote or we shouldn't vote. The option is always there on whether or not we should be able to vote. And, you know, we can go round and round as to why we vote or we not vote. We're too busy looking for an immediate solution. You know, when we hear things like, oh, well, Obama didn't do this for Black people and this happened for this, you know, the issue here is like I said in the beginning, a president by definition is a person that presides over. So it's not just, of course, he has the last word on whether or not he signs the executive order, he vetoes, we get that. But you have to climb up a chain from the local to all the way up to government. That's one. Secondly, I personally think that with what Black people went through as a whole historically, you know, to be able to have a voice in voting in itself should be reasoning to vote. Yeah. You know, I mean, if you're going to say, okay, I'm not going to vote because, you know, what good will that do? It's not changing anything, but we're not looking at the little nuances that have went on, you know, for about 40, 50, 60 years. I mean, we went through a lot. People have lost their lives just to be able to pass this ballot. And let's look at it this way. I mean, if our vote didn't really matter, why is there voter suppression in the first place? Why is it? Why are people standing in lines for 6 and 7 hours? I mean, just, what was it, 2 weeks ago, my own father called me and said he got a letter in the mail stating that his vote did not count and he voted in 2016. I mean, he got this letter 2 weeks ago. They're saying it didn't even count because it was intercepted. you know? So obviously our word, just like our physical labor and our knowledge base of how we acquire our knowledge, is very devastating and very challenging to the oppressor. And that is the reason why they're fighting so hard for us not to do that. Okay. If we were to all just say, you know, we're going to boycott this, let's just say we did boycott it, you know, so now what is the next step after that? You see what I'm saying? Okay, we boycotted, and then, you know, we try to get ourselves together inclusively, you know, and exclusively. You know, if people on the inside who are used to the complacency and the satisfaction of where they're at, we're going to freaking implode. So, you know, we got to start somewhere, you know, with the local things that we do, like with Dwayne being a very active person in his community, the way that I am active in my community here on the West Side. You know, that's very good, and we need to push that, but we need to push upward and onward as well. Because if we're just staying at a local level, okay, that's fine for us to do on our block. That's fine for us to do in historical areas like Fairfax and Huff and all of that. But how can we spread that? And sometimes we might have to go in and be our own intel in certain areas where we can pull things in, even if it's in small spurts. So I think that the vote would be very, very important.
Right. Thank you so much. Just to wrap this very insightful, very complex, and at times complicated from someone looking in from an external point of view discussion, does anyone want to kind of offer like some last sentiments in regards to this whole presidential election? What do you think the outcome will be? Who do you think, you know, does anyone have an inkling of who would actually even win this presidential election?
I mean, I think Biden will win by the actual voting numbers. Now, who ends up in office is a whole different conversation.
Exactly.
Because I don't think that Trump and them is going to go nicely like that. I mean, neither party really plays by the rules, but the Republicans definitely don't in this case. So I don't think, I really don't know who's actually going to be president. But if you're asking like, who do I think most people will vote for? I think Biden will win by a landslide if every vote is actually counted as is, just based on how the way the polls look. And I know everybody says 4 years ago the polls are off, but Hillary wasn't winning by double digits in polls like 4 or 5 days before the elections in 2016. So I don't see if things go normal, whatever that looks like, Biden wins. But I don't think things are going to go normal, honestly. So everybody should just be prepared for that, and I think everybody knows what that could potentially mean.
Yeah.
As far as moving forward, I think like I said towards the beginning, I mean, we put a lot of energy into the conversation about voting. I think it's fruitful to have these discussions, but I think ultimately, like, if our ancestors didn't just fight for one like simple right and then that was it, like it's always been a combination of things, and they've always organized. You know, the best of us have always organized and fought to, you know, on multiple levels, whether we agree with each other or not. So I think it's more effective to organize than it is to say that, are you going to organize or not? I think that's much more effective than are you going to vote or not, because you can include voting within your idea of organizing, or you cannot. But ultimately organizing, even if you don't get what you ultimately want to get out of it, even if, you know, people don't come to your meetings all the time or folks aren't as engaged as you want, when something pops off and you've been organizing for 5 years or for a whole year and something pops off, whether the police kills somebody or there's an issue in the city, you got troops because you've been organizing and you can actually coordinate something to happen. But if you don't, if you're not doing that and you just voted, you still haven't connected with anybody else. If voting is included in your organizing, then great. If it's not, I mean, that's a, you know, we can debate that differently, but I think we need to reframe this idea around like just voting and think about what does it look like.
Charmaine, closing sentiments, and then we'll just go around getting the last few words from everyone.
Vote, educate yourself on the operation of government. Understand each role in government, when you are listening and hearing things that are being said online, we live in a social media world. People can get their message across on social media. So when you see things that are going on, educate yourself. As far as international affairs with regards to our government, you have to educate yourself on that as well. Treaties and things like that. Everything isn't perfect, and every candidate is not going to be perfect. But like I said, educate yourself on all the accomplishments and all of the bad things that candidates have done, because you will find and you will see that behind the scenes, it is the opposite of that's what's been put in the forefront.
Sure.
Activism, my last point, activism is something that I haven't been engaged in as far as community-wise boots on the ground. However, I do have a lot of ties to local community activists. Activism doesn't have to just stop at one thing. You can do political activism. You can utilize your activism to throw your weight behind local candidates and advance them onto local governments, and so on and so forth. It doesn't just have to be monolithic to what goes on in the fight. We can advance them on and get them into politics and stay in behind them, hold them accountable. And if they don't meet our expectations, fire them via the vote. It's that simple. And that's all I have to say. And thank you. And it was good chatting with everybody. And thank you for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on and hearing like different view. Definitely opened my mind to some questions. I think I was also one of those people to say like, well, she did this, but I guess there's a lot of times you have to read into a bit more.
Me on my toes.
Yeah. No, I like that. It was good. Kel, closing sentiments.
Real quick. Like I still kind of like, I feel like, with the All African Revolutionary Party, we talk about how we want Trump to win only because this is like the most active the mass of the people that I've seen have been as far as like just organizing, hitting to the streets. So I think that like kind of exposes like the racist atmosphere that's here in America. On the flip side, it's like, dang, okay, I want Joe Biden to win because obviously those who are going to organize and stay active are going to stay active regardless who wins or not. But then you also just want to see that, look, this proves the point. A Democrat got in, a Democratic party got in, a president got in, and now everybody is going back to being complacent. So it'll be an interesting thing to see. I mean, if I had to make a guess who will win, honestly, at this point, I really don't know, because like even with the 2016 election, that kind of was like the upset of a lifetime. So like, who really knows? But I think either way, regardless who wins, I just like hope the people just stay like mobilized and come up with different things to, like just to get active and get involved with the people in their community, and don't just go back to, just being complacent.
Right. Thank you very much, Dwayne. Closing sentiments. What do you think? Predictions?
It's been a long time since somebody ain't did 2 terms. So I pretty much think Trump gonna win it. Like, whether that's good or bad for us, like all these presidents been bad for us. But like Kel said, like once Trump got in there, our people did actually get active. Like people who've been sitting on their behinds forever, like, and get active. Like, hey, we need to get this dude out of office. And I enjoy it. I enjoy like our Black people coming up in arms, and I support Black people. Like I've actually helped people's voting campaigns without me voting. Like I've done their video marketing and all that, because I believe in them, the people themselves, the Black people themselves, not the politicians. Like I said, I think we need to involve many facets to this. But my biggest issue is that a lot of these Democratic voting folks, they on attack mode, like, and it's no recognition to anything else. Like it's to where like how Lotus said, like, it's not her fault, but like her view is that, our activism is like on Harvard or some local block, when in truth is global. Like, it's way bigger than this presidential election. It's way bigger. It's older. Like, our struggle is older than this country. Like, so to dismiss that, the main meat of the struggle for a vote, we can't do that. Like, and this vote or die movement must die. This voting or you don't matter, it must die. Like, that is the worst thing we can do to each other, is saying we don't matter when you out here busting your ass, forget my French. You are busting your ass for the people and actually seeing results. And then somebody comes and you tell you don't matter or you need to die because you're not going to something that you see hasn't worked. You know, that's my stance. And my main point is, like, I support Black people first.
Yeah.
If your organization or whatever is into voting, if that's how you feel, you got to get it. Hey, I'm still here to support you. Screw the government, screw all of that. I'm still here to support you. I'll still help you get your campaign off. I'll still do all that. But people don't want to hear that. They just want to bash you and get you to vote for Biden. You know, and I put that on the table. I put that on the table. Real life, not no bluffing.
And even with Trump in office, it's actually like America is going to destroy itself. So that's another thing for those who want to, like, you really want to dismantle the system. Like, Trump is going to help America destroy itself. So it's kind of like
shoot itself in the foot.
In the plan.
Lotus, and you, closing sentiments, predictions, or any last comments?
Well, like Kel, I just don't know, because, you know, like he said in 2016, you know, we looked at the popular vote and that was superseded by the Electoral College. So, you know, we can't say definitively who is going to win, because, you know, when you look at it on a national scale, you know, it does give the appearance like our votes don't matter, because, again, Hillary had the popular vote, but she didn't have the vote of the Electoral College. Exactly. So I can't really speak definitively on that, but moving forward, I also agree with Two Black, and I agree with Dwayne. It's not enough just to focus on one subject matter, which is voting. We have to be able to act behind the vote. You know, we can't just go out there in long lines for 6, 8, 9 hours to post our ballot in, just to go back in the house and complain about our same struggle we've been going through since time immemorial. There's got to be a thing where we get involved with our communities and bond again, and understand that everything goes in levels. You know, it starts with the individual, then you've got the community, the neighborhood, the city, the state, the country, and the world. But you know, we have to come together and work together from a local scale all the way to a global scale, and understand that we might not always agree on everything, but if we have a common ground of sticking together, supporting each other, building each other up, you know, we would not need a government entity to sustain us, you know, because that is what has been going on since America's inception. As Dwayne said, a lot of times we're actually looking, quote unquote, for a leader when the leader is in us. We just have to have the wherewithal, the education, the determination and perseverance to push the envelope and limit the consequence. Until we are able to do that, then we're going to always forever be in this quandrum, you know, until America does implode, because it has imploded several times since its inception. If we look at history, it really has just boom, just blew up. So that's what I say about that.
Thank you very much. And lastly, Shawn, what are your predictions and closing sentiments in this discussion?
I honestly don't know who's going to win. I hope that it's Joe Biden, but it could very likely be Donald Trump. Incumbent presidents, well, incumbency carries with it a 98% chance of re-election. That's across the board, from dog catcher to president. 98% of the time, the incumbent will get reelected. So there's no one who's honest who says Joe Biden's absolutely going to win. I hope he wins,
But I won't be surprised if Donald Trump wins straight up.
Yeah.
I absolutely won't be surprised if he steals it. I hope that doesn't happen.
Thank you so much. Thank you all very much for coming to African Diaspora Discussions. It's been very insightful. I've been able to get like a lot of different views and opinions. I think from someone outside of the US, I'm still, you know, a bit skeptical about the whole voting system, but I understand the need to vote in the sense that, you know, a lot of people say like, well, if you're not going to vote, you can't complain. But, you know, the whole voting system internationally, despite, you know, countries and borders, is a flawed system. And hopefully we can be able to kind of overcome that in the not too far future. But for those of you at home, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And for my panelists, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'll put all your information and your social media handles and like underneath the video. So thank you very much for joining me.